representing Canada's financial capital, the fourth largest city in North America, and the most amazing city in the world. This is Toronto Business Journal.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for everyone out there in our viewer land joining us to another amazing episode of Toronto Business Journal. And we have a fantastic guest today. Chief Tony is going to be telling us about his company's work with Trans Mountain Pipeline. Take it away, Santosh.
Chief Tony was elected to council at the age of 25 and has been chief of Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation since 2013. Born and raised on the Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation, Chief Tony Alexis is a fifth-generation leader and descendant of Mitaushin Aranazhi, who signed the Adhesion of Treaty No. 6 for his people in 1877. Chief Tony is passionate about serving his people as a community leader on both national and international political events. His aspirations include protecting inherent and treaty rights, maintaining culture, language, history, and customs, as well as building businesses and generating capital to support his community and future generations. Chief Tony has built business opportunities for his nation, including Backwoods Energy Services, a construction company servicing oil, gas, utility, and forestry industries in Western Canada, the Cascade Power Plant, and the new formation of the First Nation Capital Investment Partnership and Nesika services are part of his portfolio to continue doing business to advance his nation and work in collaboration with other Indigenous leaders and communities. Chief Tony is an internationally accomplished public speaker who is able to connect with people from all walks of life. He earned the Alberta Aboriginal Leadership Award, Aboriginal Role Models of Alberta Award, and is recognized for his work with the government, hospitality, and industry on cross-cultural relations and building. Chief Tony was appointed to the First National Youth Council in 1997 and also served as the Treaty 6 Grand Chief in 2015, among many other leadership roles. Chief Tony believes the keys to success are through consistent focus, faith in the Creator, and hard work. Welcome to the show, Chief Tony. Very good to have you here.
Thank you, Sonny.
No problem.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us, Chief Tony. So we're very anxious to learn about your amazing initiative because the Trans Mountain Pipeline, as everybody know, has been a source of great controversy in Canada and First Nations communities in particular for, being a sort of a symbol of the continued neo-colonial and purported colonial relationship that unfortunately Canada's had with First Nations. But it seems that you have a new initiative which is trying to empower First Nations rather than being subjugated to continual sort of colonialism. So we're anxious to learn about this initiative you have with the Trans Mountain, which is going to provide for a great source of community economic development for First Nations.
Raymond, thank you, and Sonny, for that introduction. Again, my name is Chief Tony Alexis. I'm from the Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation. I'm here as the chairman for Nesika. Nesika is a not-for-profit organization that aims at purchasing and facilitating a transaction with the Trans Mountain Pipeline on behalf of Indigenous communities along the access route. So there are 129 that are on that route, and from that, we are working with 14 of them presently. So our goal over the next little while is to continue developing our membership, inviting all 129 communities to participate and work with us.
Amazing. So so what you've developed is a sort of a not-for-profit consortium. Is it mostly First Nations in Alberta and BC, or how expansive is the participation in your not-for-profit initiative?
So the Trans Mountain Pipeline, from the beginning, Canada engaged 129 Indigenous communities, First Nation, Métis, Indigenous communities along the pipeline. So there's 129 of them that were engaged. The same 129 we've been reached out. So Canada has reached out to them as well. So I remember, if you remember, that at one point there was this conversation that the pipeline may be for sale, or that Indigenous people would have an opportunity. There was that conversation a couple of years ago, and since that time there have been people organizing themselves. But just recently, Canada, through finance, has engaged with the communities, not so much the communities individually, but with groups like ours, like Nesika. So again, Nesika being a nonprofit, we are working with Indigenous communities, and it expands from Alberta and BC. So that's where the 129 communities are being engaged from. And Nesika, again, I mentioned there's 14 right now. The membership continues to grow on a regular basis. So, but I'm one of the founding directors of Nesika from Alexis.
And in terms of, I guess, you being a not-for-profit organization, that sounds to me like it would be a very sort of unique initiative in terms of a pipeline, because when we think of pipelines, we all think it's about for-profit, but you're trying to turn something that's traditionally conceived of just to be for a limited group of shareholders into something which is can empower communities. So I guess you're very sort of unique in a historical sense.
That's right, Raymond. So look at the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion. Before that, there was Kinder Morgan has a pipeline that went through there 60 years ago. At that time, the 129 communities that are being engaged now, no one, as a matter of fact, no Indigenous community received any benefits from that. No economic benefits. If there was environmental issues, we had no say in that. Any sort of governance, we had no say in that. For 60 years, they created some revenue and benefits for the owners of that pipeline. Today, when we look at this expansion, we think that it's the most responsible thing we can do right now as Indigenous people is to have a seat at that table. It's very important to have that. If we have a seat at the table, we have any environmental issues, we can participate in it right now, like real time. If there are any governance issues, we can participate in, as well as gauge how we're going to develop that governance. And just as important as all of that is the economic benefits. As Indigenous people, when we receive any sort of resource, our responsibility is to share that amongst all the people. You go back 1,000 years ago, and the way our people lived, we were very wealthy. There was no poor people. We were very wealthy. We were rich in culture, rich in who we are as a people, looked after one another. Our society was strong. And, we still have that fabric of who we are as Indigenous people within us. It's within our spirit. And so once we do gain, revenue and resource like that, that comes back into the community. And because we're a non-for-profit, and eventually, a transaction has to be done with this pipeline. Once the resources come in, it goes directly to all the communities. So that's the reason for the not-for-profit. Nesika is specifically there to help facilitate a transaction for all the communities. And once the communities receive the benefit, they can invest it in infrastructure and the growth of the community, as well as the people, into programs and services, which it's real good growth for our people. So when I look at the opportunity that's here for us right now, it allows us to have that freedom. And one of my elders, a former chief from my community, every time I speak, I always remind that the government had many promises, as you mentioned, and within those promises, a lot of people have been waiting for all of those promises to be fulfilled. And instead of continuing to wait, we've been taking an active approach on generating wealth, creating businesses. So once we have that, we can invest that within ourselves and build our own communities. And maybe one day the government will fulfill all those promises, but we're not waiting any longer. We're just moving ahead and building now.
I think one of the sort of the prejudices, the misguided prejudices that some Canadians have had is that, with respect to the the Trans Mountain Pipeline, is that First Nations are against, any sort of economic development, which isn't true. They're just against economic development, which doesn't give back to the community and potentially destroys the environment. So when you have a not-for-profit organization where the community themselves are all shareholders, then won't that ensure that the pipeline will be done responsibly, because all the people are just active communications, they're a part of the actual governance structure? So would it not be a sort of the byproduct of that?
That's correct, Raymond. I mean, like I said, if you're sitting at the table, you can influence. If you're sitting at the table, you can make that decision. But if we are not, and like the last pipeline that went through 60 years ago, no one was at the table. We've just been at the mercy of whatever it is going to happen, or something might bust, or we've never had that opportunity to speak to it or to be a part of it. But this opportunity right now, it allows us to sit at the table and to have the governance. And it's not like the pipeline is not going through. It's about 80-90% done now. So all that consultation has been done. Most of the pipeline is nearly done. And so now, the idea is to get a seat at the table so we can deal with those issues of environment, of governance, and benefit from it economically as well.
So my understanding as well is that there were at least, I know, one other group that's First Nations, but they are a for-profit entity. Is that still the case? That they're trying to buy the pipeline?
Yeah, there are other groups, but for them, they have a partnership. They have a predetermined pipeline partner. They also have financing that banks that they're trying to bring in. We're not doing that. Nesika's waiting for Canada to decide if this pipeline is going to go for sale, because right now it's not for sale. It's just been the conversation that has been carrying on for the last couple of years. But until Canada decides some terms and conditions, and only at that time is when we can really engage. And once we know what those terms and conditions are, we can start to facilitate what the next steps will be for Nesika and for the communities that we serve.
Is there, because we all know how money influences politics, and how a lot of times in our economic system, the shareholders that have the deepest pockets oftentimes have the most sort of political influence. Is there any sort of concern among your group that that sort of, because you are competing against sort of for-profit entities, that there might be any sort of political context which might distract from the type of inspiring sort of community economic focus that you're trying to accomplish relative to those sort of competing bids that might just have deeper pockets with more political influence? Or you're not really concerned about that at this stage?
I don't think that's something to be concerned with at this stage. Like, first, what Canada has to do is disclose terms and conditions. And once we have that, then we know how to structure the deal. Just implying that this is how we're going to purchase this product without even knowing what the product is or what the conditions of that product will be for it to be on the market, it just seems foolish. Like, so you and I can't go out and say we're going to buy a house. We don't know what the terms and conditions are of that house. We just go around saying we're buying that house. You could try to force it. I don't think that's the right way to go. Right now, once we know what the terms and conditions are, and we had this experience with Cascade, as you mentioned earlier today. Once we knew what those terms and conditions were, it was way easier to negotiate, and as well as to create a win-win for all the parties that were involved. And in that, we also brought in other Indigenous communities that benefited from that business too.
We all know that our Prime Minister has been great with, words, of reconciliation. After all that, for example, work with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, his only recommendation that he actually seemed to have been wanting to do was to fly the Canadian flag half-mast. So have you gotten any sort of positive feedback from any government officials? You don't have to name them, but any sort of abstract feedbacks, that's positive, or have they just not, because not for sale, you haven't heard any sort of feedback at all? Like, any feedback out there?
Of course, all governments reach out to communities, especially at times when, for example, when those children were found at the Kamloops residential school. Immediately there was a lot of people, not only the government, but people at large, generally at large across the country, reached out and were very shocked at the fact that children were being found in that way. You know, the Indigenous community have been talking about it for a long time, for decades, that this has been going on. And it wasn't until those children were found that it woke up the entire country. Not only the country, other places in the world too that participated and shared their support. And it wasn't until then. And what it basically revealed was validation. So now we have not only the Indigenous people saying it, we have non-Indigenous people who are standing up and speaking, and as well as encouraging the government to take more proactive approach on discovering the truth. You know, this what has been going on in this country, on this land, has been revealed because of those children. So they're like those little warriors, those little spirits, you know, woke up the entire country.
In terms of the proposal that you've been sort of developing to for this sort of not-for-profit entity and their prospects for taking over the pipeline, I guess you've developed a sort of business plan which says that, you know, if we get the pipeline, this will be the type of community economic developments that we can envision throughout the community in uplifting and building the sort of the being an engine of sort of community economic development in various communities in Alberta and BC. Have there been sort of those projections that have been a part of that you've been sort of fine tuning?
We can't really speak to numbers right now. Again, we're waiting for Canada to reveal terms and conditions. But on the community side, you know, there are 129 communities there, and each one, especially the First Nations, they're like a little country within a country here. You know, we identify ourselves as sovereign people, and what we do as a government is that when we have resource, we make it a part of the community, whether it's programs and services or reinvestment. You know, just like any government, that's what will happen. So we as Nesika will not decide how each community will spend their money. That's not up to us. Our goal is to make sure that we facilitate a transaction that's beneficial to everyone, and this transaction that coming forward, you know, we make sure everybody's treated as, you know, as fair as possible, and the communities together will have to decide that. How should this money be split amongst all the communities? And it has to be fair, it has to be equitable, and those conversations will come once we know what this transaction is going to look like.
Awesome. Yeah. So one of the things which I like aspects about a not-for-profit organization is that its ethic is sort of community driven, that is not about profit, it's about empowering people, it's about serving the community. So so what sort of so I guess you're as a leader in the community and as a public servant, I guess you're inspired by the importance of serving community as a part of the First Nations philosophy of being communal rather than just being about, you know, individuals, sort of isolated people just making profit and exploiting the land. So I guess there's a lot of, you know, tremendous amount of sort of a worldview that is going into this your purchasing of the envisioned purchase. That's sort of generating this sort of positive sort of communal focus that we don't necessarily really find in most of the economy.
There's a couple ways to answer that, Raymond, but for sure, like when we look at the economic benefits that will come to the community, we do have plans, and our goal is to always continue to grow. We want to reinvest in our culture and our heritage. We want to invest in education. We want to continue creating new businesses and expanding more businesses so that you know, we continue growing as a people. You know, our community, we're focused in that right now, and that's been our goal. We've been doing some really good things as of late, and as we learn, you know, our responsibility is to share with others. And you know, in anything that you do in business, you should always have a great team. We do have a good team, a sophisticated team at Nesika, who have the experience of facilitating a transaction of this magnitude. So we're very happy about that. We have a strong team with Nesika, with Chief McKay from BC as well, and myself from Alberta. And we're reaching out to other communities to participate and work with us.
Are there any sort of recent projects or immediate future projects that you wanted to highlight, which sort of complements what you're doing with respect to your vision for the Trans Mountain Pipeline?
I think the idea of this Trans Mountain Pipeline, the way we are facilitating this, could become a template of how to copy this again throughout the country on any project, any future projects that the country may be working on. This I think could set a precedent on how those transactions could be done with Indigenous communities and in partnership with other businesses too.
So I guess you're open to other First Nations communities across Canada who may want to know about what you're doing and how they can sort of model their own sort of resource development to what you're doing as a not-for-profit organization. I guess you're open to that. And have you been getting sort of feedback from other First Nations across Canada?
Yeah, other communities reach out all the time. I mean, as chiefs, and we're like, wherever you're from in the country, when you meet one of your own people, your relatives, we automatically just share a story. How are you doing, etc. And in times like this, if something is good that is happening, those are shared too. But for Nesika, our goal is to share, whatever we've done here, share it freely and share it publicly. That this is a good way of doing it. And so you have to know that the Indigenous community were not even allowed to leave their communities till the 1960s. We couldn't hire a lawyer.
Wow.
We vote in elections. And just in one generation, we've grown so much. We have academic success across the country. We're becoming masters of all the institutions, whether academia, commerce, medicine, governance. We've grown a lot in that time. And because of that growth that we've done on our own, we're in a place today that we can sit at a table and potentially own a pipeline right now. An asset such as this that creates wealth for the people.
Are there areas that Nesika is actively doing outreach that it invites people, whether they're Canadians in general or First Nations in particular? Are there any areas that you're sort of inviting people to sort of participate as you sort of develop this vision before the pipeline becomes formally on sale? Are you inviting any sort of people to want to consult with you in any sort of areas that you're trying to develop as part of your preparation for when the pipeline is on sale? Or are you basically all set and you're just ready and waiting to by an announcement by the government whether they're going to sell or not?
Well, the idea of consulting right now for us, for Nesika, we're on a membership call. So we're going to reaching out to 129 communities to invite them to be a part of Nesika. That's our goal. It's a non-binding letter that they can sign, and they could join our meetings and listen to and understand the issues that are there. There's also a memorandum of understanding that they could sign to have a seat at the board table. So those are immediate options available for those 129 communities. But in general, consultation has been done for this project. It's nearly completed. And, that's not something that we're looking at right now. We're waiting for this project to be done. We're waiting for Canada to announce that if they do announce that this pipeline is for sale, that we are ready for that moment. That's what we are working towards today.
And so basically your contact is, as far as government, is primarily with, just waiting to see what happens with the Prime Minister's office. I guess there's not so much contact with Premier Kinney or Hogan as far as BC. They're not really a part of any sort of immediate equation in terms of what you're waiting on.
No, I mean, Canada holds this right now. So our goal is to speak to Canada. Yeah. And when Canada announces the terms and conditions of this, then we'll be in negotiations. So we anticipate negotiations over the next month or two.
Awesome. That's good stuff. So is there any areas of the what you're doing with the pipeline that you would like to sort of express that you haven't got a chance to express before in previous interviews that really you thought is important for the First Nations to know about or Canadians to know about in general? Any areas that you wanted to kind of touch on?
I think the thing I'd like to share right now is that Indigenous communities, like I said, have come a long way. We learned how to develop teams, sophisticated teams that can look at transactions of this magnitude, as well as we've seen a lot. We've seen a lot on this side where we were never invited to be a part of it or to be a part of it. And now we know how to do work on both sides of it. So we're done right there. We've been building ourselves, and Raymond, it looks it's very promising. So, but I'd just like to answer that again. So you mentioned, Raymond, that we can cut some of this, but I have people at my window that keep knocking and hitting the door, and they're trying to get.
Okay, they're trying. Okay.
A lot of people who are trying to get here right now, and like I said, I'm busy, but.
Okay. Do you want to say something quickly? Ask Chief Tony something. It's on top because he has to go very, very soon.
Oh, I understand.
I just want to answer the question. So the question that you asked me, and where we're at right now as a community, as Indigenous communities, that we are in that place that we can engage sophisticated support and help. We don't have to know everything. We know what it is that we want to accomplish, and we don't have to know everything, but we do know how to put teams together. And we do know how to create a strong team to accomplish anything that we want to do today. So that is a success story that all Indigenous people are that we have today. So it's a really good time for our community across the land. And as Indigenous people, we've done a lot. We've come through a lot, and we've done a lot. And the future is really bright as we learn more about these ways of building our nations.
Okay.
Very inspiring. Oh yeah, I just wanted to say, social media has also really helped you, help people be more aware of all the things that are happening. That in the 1960s, there was only one view, but now we're thankful to be getting a lot more perspectives, and definitely that's great, helping more people learn about it. And I also noticed that you're not the advantage of being nonprofit is that. You do make a profit still, but it's more it's better in the long term. It's better usually for the environment. It's better if it seems more equally shared and done in a much more a sustainable way, rather than just go only for profit and then you're destroying nature and you're destroying communities, and it's actually very short term. So it's very inspiring to hear you talk today. Just wanted to add that. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Chief Tony, for joining us today with your inspiring message of empowerment to First Nations communities and community economic development, and we're all crossing our fingers that the Prime Minister will make an announcement that will be fair to all bidding parties, but that you'll hopefully be the winner because of the extent to which your bid, as you've expressed today, will have such a broad level based empowerment to communities which have for so long have been disenfranchised politically, economically, and socially. And socially, it's about time that these communities had a chance to reinvigorate themselves together as proud nations and self-governing nations.
Thank you, Raymond.
So thank you very much again, Chief Tony.
Thank you so much, Chief Tony.